Hey guys, how's it going? It's been a little bit, and as per usual, I saw something recently on Twitter that sort of caught my eye. Now, Ben and I have touched on this phenomenon on many a podcast, but I thought it would be beneficial to make a shorter video just about it, because it needs to be addressed. And I feel like I need to say something because there are a lot of guys who I think are afraid to even talk about this, and I totally understand why, because you get this really intense reaction when you try to talk to anyone about it. Anyone who isn't maybe aware of it or doesn't understand it. Now, there was a tweet, this woman tweeted, the way men talk about women behind their backs is horrifying, or something like that. And yeah, I can get behind that. Some guys say some pretty gnarly and creepy and nasty shit. And then someone commented on that saying, yeah, I had a guy tell me it's meaningless to be friends with a woman. It's meaningless to be friends with a woman, because, you know, the only thing, I guess he was after is sex or whatever. And obviously that's a pretty dumb statement as well. Just saying it's meaningless to be with a woman at all. I mean, be friends with a woman at all is obviously a ridiculous overgeneralization. And then someone commented on that. I can't go back and reread this because he immediately blocked me, of course, right as we started to discuss this. He had said, yeah, a lot of men say they can't be friends with women, with a lot of women, and the reason for this is obvious, he said, it's because they see women as nothing more than objects, and they don't value them at all, which, from my perspective, couldn't be farther off base. So I responded to him, that's not the reason at all. I mean, I'm sure there are some, I know there are a lot of shitty guys out there who, I guess, don't value women. But the reason for a lot of guys to not pursue platonic relationships with women is not because they don't value them, but it's for another reason entirely. Now, with people like this who like to sort of broadcast their thoughts on how society should work and all their standards, as if they are total fact, and everything else that they don't agree with is immediately problematic. Those people are always so bigoted. They really are, and the left does this a lot. I mean, it's becomes easier and easier to see the hypocrisy behind how they say they're really open-minded, and then if something doesn't fit exactly what they're trying to tell you, it's like the worst thing ever, and how could you come to that conclusion, blah blah blah. So the first thing we need to understand is that they say that there are a lot of minorities and a lot of people who live under different circumstances whose struggles and experiences you could never understand, and I agree with that. I think, they always say it's like you'll never know what it's like to be trans. You never know what it's like to be a black person living in America, and I understand those. But in this case, the thing is, everyone wants to, besides those few specific ones that seem to be off limits, people really want to think they understand everyone else's experiences. I think a lot of you know, I went through a very bad breakup this past summer. Really fucked me up, and almost everyone, probably 30 some people I talked to, of course, they all said, oh, I know exactly what you're going through, I've been there. And I wanted to believe them in the moment, but looking back, I think only one or two of those 30 some people actually did kind of go through a very similar thing that I went through. But that's my point. Everyone wants to try and relate to everyone else, but sometimes you just can't. that definitely goes for, you know, lots of minorities in America. And that also, in this situation, in this case, it goes for men with really high levels of testosterone. So I don't think a lot of people are aware of this. And again, it's really tough to even discuss, because women especially, they immediately, when you start to bring it up, and you start to try to explain it, they immediately get like scared and defensive because they don't like what you're saying. And their mind immediately goes to these dark places, like, you know, I guess they get like rapey vibes and stuff. This has nothing to do with any of that. Up front, I want to say that, you know, it blows my mind and shocks me and horrifies me that rape happens and exists. I could never in a million years imagine doing that to someone, and it's not directly congruent with what I'm gonna try to explain here. So, and people, I'm always, and women almost don't even, usually don't like this about me. I'm very hesitant to even make a first move, ever. I rarely have ever made a first move. Their comfort in any romantic or sexual situation is always like the main thing I'm concerned about and hoping that is maximized, you know? So I need that to be said, because again, as soon as you bring this up, a lot of women are like, oh, red flag. But this is just the way the world works. None of us asked for this. So men with really high levels of testosterone, I think women think men walk around all like happy-go-lucky all the time, and after sex, because they're just a shallow person and that's all they want or whatever. That's not really the case at all. When you are, especially a very young man, like late teens and early 20s, and you do have fairly high levels of testosterone, like I do and many of my friends do, it's not, a lot of the time, I want to say 50% of the time, feels like an annoyance. It feels like a curse. It feels like a little nagging voice in your head that you want to go away. And that desire for a sexual interaction will just not quit. And you often wish there could be a little switch in your head and you could just turn it off. But you can't. Women are obviously designed to carry a child, so their needs are more directed long-term. They're more selective because of this, whereas men are designed, obviously, to just create as much life as they can. So with us, and with especially men who have really high levels of this, it's just always on. It's always like, I need to do it, I need to do it, I need to fuck, right? It just never fucking turns off. I mean, I have a much better handle on it now, but it takes time and it's incredibly overwhelming. It's sort of always at the forefront of your mind, especially in those younger years when you were becoming an adult. But again, it needs to be clarified that, you know, touching someone, do not have the consent to touch, versus just being compelled in your mind to do so, are very different things. You know, the annoying constant urge to need sex, to desire sex, usually manifests itself with me and with a lot of my buddies, and maybe just being slightly annoying to girls, and, you know, texting them a little too much, being maybe a little too pushy at times, and regretting it immediately afterwards. But it would never occur to me, no matter how bad it would get, to lay a finger on someone without their explicit consent. So those things need to be separated, and it needs to be very clear that that does not necessarily instantly lead to another thing. I think, I've read and heard a lot about people try to decipher the psychology of rapists, and a lot of the time it doesn't come from just that natural desire for sex. It comes from a different place altogether. So my point of this video is that when women and men who maybe don't get it tend to put down men who can't be friends with women, it's similar to being friends with someone that you love deeply but can't be with romantically. People know that hurts. You guys, I'm sure, know that in itself hurts a lot. It's very similar to that. You have this strong sexual attraction to someone that you know won't be fulfilled, and it is simply discomforting to be around them because of that. And it is so overwhelmingly so that a lot of the time it's for the sake of the guy to just remove himself from the company of that person, because otherwise it is just too painful to to be worth it. When you have to literally constantly make a strong conscious effort to suppress this desire, suddenly, unfortunately, the need to suppress it outweighs the benefits of being their friend. And I know that sounds bad, but again, if you don't understand what I'm saying right now, then you will probably never understand it exactly. You will never understand how it feels. Because I've had a lot of guy friends who express to me that they are, again, genuinely just pained by this feeling that just never goes away, and it's just nagging at you and just nagging at you. And that's what they, that's what the whole post-nut clarity thing comes from, right? It's the very fact that exists shows you that this desire is always there. And it's only in like the 15 minutes to half an hour after you satisfy that desire that you can think without that nagging at you constantly. But then imagine that, blown up times 10, and it can really fuck up a lot of relationships, I don't mean romantic relationships, obviously. I mean just platonic relationships with people, because it's not worth it. And yet it's too bad, I mean, but it has nothing to do with not valuing them. A lot of the women that I maybe could have been friends with but chose not to be because of this exact reason, many of them were kinder than me, more intelligent than me, more accomplished than me. And like I was aware of that. It had nothing to do with like, oh, I only see them as an object. It had to do with the fact that my brain was telling me that I needed to satisfy this desire, and unfortunately, that sort of overwhelmed my ability to just enjoy this person's company as a friend, And if you can't even consider what I'm trying to explain right now, then you should ask yourself, am I really an open-minded person, or am I just accepting the social norms that are sort of fed to me, and because this is not widely accepted and talked about, I consider it problematic, right? So ask yourself that question, because again, if you're not a guy who's thinking to yourself, yeah, this sounds right, then you will probably never know how it feels. And that's okay. I mean, there are a lot of, every single individual person has experiences that no one else can understand, because everyone is an individual and they are their own unique human being. So instead of discarding and being unaccepting of new information that you may find uncomfortable, try to at least be mindful of it, you know? Try to think of it in a situation where it may apply, and don't feel bad if a guy doesn't want to be friends with you, because it is like, I mean, imagine there's someone you really love, you want to marry them and have kids with them, you just love them so much romantically, you want to be with them, and they are already in a relationship with someone else. And I think many of us have been in this situation where you know how painful it is to simply be in their company because you feel this certain attraction towards them that, in that moment at least, cannot be fulfilled. It's very distressing and uncomfortable being with someone that you love when you cannot have them in that way. Same exact thing here. It's very distressing and discomforting spending a lot of time with a woman in a platonic way when you have this constant desire for them. And then, yes, I mean, you can, of course, it's like they all say, have self-control. And it's like, yeah, we do. We're not, I mean, most of us do, thank God. You know, there are a lot of guys that need to work on that. There are a lot of guys that are horrible lost causes altogether, for sure. But thankfully, most of us understand that, yeah, we can't do that. If they don't want it, we obviously can't do that. But it still creates this psychological disconnect where we can't get what we strongly desire from this person. And that is why, for the best, by extension, we are controlling ourselves by choosing not to be around that person. That's totally fine. It has nothing to do with whether we value you or not as a human being, and it has everything to do with the fact that we cannot turn off this extremely primordial, fundamental need that is constantly nagging at us. And wrapping back to this breakup I went through over the summer, it was only after I was so like rock bottom depressed that my libido almost completely went away. I'd never had that happen to me before, but I was so deeply, at times catatonically depressed that desire completely just went away for like a solid month or so. And the one good thing that did come from that was that suddenly women who I would sort of keep at a safe distance and maybe only reach out to once in a blue moon when I felt said urge we were discussing, those women I was suddenly able to interact with in a friendly way and be comfortable in that. And I have maintained a couple pretty good relationships with these women, and I finally, for the first time in my life, 26, for the first time in my life, I'm feeling comfortable and okay and good and happy being around them as a friend. But it took me going through one of the most painful and depressing experiences of my life in order for that to happen. So it's a tough one, and especially for again younger men, late teens, early 20s, it does not go away. So just know that if a guy does choose to sort of walk away and cut communication with you, I mean, maybe he's an asshole, right? But also maybe it's for the good of both you and him. Because otherwise, he'd just be putting himself in this painful position. And what happens with a lot of guys, if they do try to remain friends anyway, because whether they think if they remain friends long enough and something will happen eventually, or whether they genuinely believe, you know, they like you enough that they could, you know, they want you in their life regardless of what happens. Eventually, I've heard this happening many times, eventually they will make a move either way, and they will regret it and they will mess it up, because it's always there. Okay. It's always there. You gotta, it's important for people to recognize this. And again, it's not fun. It does feel like a shackle. It feels like something you are bound to and you would like to break free from, but you know, 90% of the time you cannot. So most of the time when men choose not to be in a relationship with a woman, it is for the benefit of both parties. It is not because they're an asshole who just wanted one thing. It is because, unfortunately, their brain was telling them they needed that one thing. And that message that was being sent to them over and over and over again would just never stop. So remember that, people. Remember that, you know, a lot of guys are in this constant partial agony, and it kind of sucks, and it drives us to do a lot of the things we do. Unfortunately, that pain and that desire for sex creates a lot of productivity, you know, but it is a painful, constant need nonetheless. And for the guys watching this, I just want to say you should not be ashamed of this. It breaks my heart how many guys I think are just terrified to even ever talk about this, because they know they're going to get shot down and demonized and alienated. Yeah, just know that you should not be ashamed of it at all. It's not your fault. Obviously, we do have the responsibility of controlling it, but the feeling, and however you choose to safely remove yourself from those situations, is totally fine. And again, like I said, this constant nagging desire, as painful as it is a strong driving factor for productivity. And I know myself, I wouldn't have done a lot of the things I've done in my life. I wouldn't have created a lot of the things I've created if I didn't feel that desire. So it can be a force for good, as awful as it feels a lot of the time. You just got to be careful with it. But just please don't be ashamed of it. I'm tired of the world wanting to sort of brush this under the rug like it doesn't exist. It's really unhealthy for everyone. So if there's someone that can't accept it, or someone that is now scared of you and uncomfortable being around you because you've tried to explain this to them as well as you can, then you don't want them in your life anyway. And they're not the open-minded angel that they claim to be.